Quiero coger el cielo, quiero tocar esa estrella roja del amanecer. Subo al techo pero no llego allá. El cielo está más lejos que el mar. Dime cómo llegaré.
July is an important month in Cuban history. It was on the 26th of July 1953 that Fidel Castro and his comrades led the first attack on the Moncada barracks in southeast Cuba to signal the beginning of the revolution which succeeded in 1959. It had been a long-drawn battle, and relief at its success was immense. Celebrations on an unprecedented scale when the Batista dictatorship came to an end. But what does the revolution look like today, 31 years later? How does Fidel Castro reflect on socialism as he has practiced it in his country? What lessons has he learned from the collapse of a certain socialist model in Eastern Europe, for instance? To find out, we visited Cuba and sought an interview with one of the great revolutionaries of our time. At long last, I was granted what turned out to be the first ever interview by Castro to an Indian journalist. President Castro, or Comandante as he is affectionately called in his country, keeps such a busy schedule that we did not know the exact time of the interview until just half an hour before it was to take place. It began at 9:30 p.m. and, believe it or not, lasted a good 4 hours. An interview with Castro is not a conventional question and answer session. He goes into great detail to make his point in what in the end turns out to be a relaxed conversation. We present excerpts from this conversation in 2 parts. Sir, the Cuban Revolution succeeded in 1959.
La Revolución Cubana triunfó en 1959.
And your perspective then was that
entonces
this was the beginning of a process,
era el principio de un proceso,
that you will have, in fact, similar regimes in Latin America and the whole of America.
Proceso que comenzaba y que culminaría con sistemas similares que se instaurarían en el resto de América Latina.
What went wrong with that dream?
Me pregunto, ¿qué salió mal respecto a este sueño?
Bueno, no se puede decir que ningún sueño sale mal.
I cannot say that a dream goes wrong.
Mientras un sueño pueda ser algún día realidad.
While a dream can one day become reality, you should not say that
Yo
it has
pienso
gone
que
wrong.
todos los sueños
I think that in every dream,
se han dilatado a lo largo de la historia.
every dream has taken a long time in history to
Incluso los
occur.
fundadores de las grandes
Even the
religiones
founders of the great religions,
no pensaban
they did not think
cuántos siglos tardarían
how many centuries it would take
en que una religión se
for a
propagara.
religion to disseminate all over the world.
Muchos filósofos,
Many
muchos pensadores.
philosophers and thinkers
En materia de sueños,
had ideas, but in matters of dreams,
si los sueños son justos,
if dreams are fair,
nunca fallan.
they never failed.
Es cuestión de tiempo.
It's just a matter of time.
So you are still dreaming?
De manera que todavía usted sueña?
Si no soñara,
Sure, if I did not dream,
entonces no tendría sentido el esfuerzo que hago
then the effort I'm making
todos los días junto
every
al
day
pueblo
together with my people would not make sense
por cosas cada vez
for
mejores, cada vez más
things
perfectas.
that we are trying to improve.
Si no soñara,
if I did not have dreams,
no me podía autoconceptuar
I would
como
not be
revolucionario.
able to consider myself a revolutionary,
Porque los que nos consideramos
because we
revolucionarios,
who consider ourselves revolutionary,
lo que hemos hecho toda la vida
the ones,
es soñar.
what we have done all our lives is to dream.
After 31 years of your
Después de
revolution,
31 años de revolución,
do you reflect with satisfaction on what you have been able to achieve?
¿piensa usted con satisfacción en las
in your
cosas
country?
que ha logrado para su país?
Le puedo decir que aquí hay una
I
dualidad
can tell you that in this case we have a dual thing,
de sentimiento.
a dual sentiment,
Porque yo me considero un
because I consider
eterno inconforme.
myself an eternal nonconformist.
Y entonces todos los días puedo
And
pensar
then I may
cuántas cosas
every
pudimos haber
day
hecho mejor.
think about how many things could have been done better,
Perfectas, por un-
how many things could have been done more productive.
Pero al mismo tiempo soy capaz
However, at the same
de
time,
analizar con objetividad
I analyze with objectivity
la obra de la revolución.
the work of the revolution.
Creo
And
sinceramente
I sincerely believe
que ha sido un avance gigante
that it has been a great advancement
y que muchas cosas,
and that many things,
las realidades, han
in many
superado
aspects,
nuestros sueños.
realities have gone beyond our dreams.
De modo que tanto en el orden
So both
de los hechos, de
in
la
the
obra de la
field of the
revolución,
work of the revolution, properly said,
como en el orden de las ideas,
as well as in the field of ideas,
ha sido
we feel
enorme el avance.
there has been a
En estos
tremendous achievement in all these 31 years.
Pero no me pregunto si estoy conforme.
But do not ask me whether I am conformist with that, because I would have to say no, we would like to have more.
You describe yourself as a non-conformist leader.
Usted se describe a sí mismo como un inconforme.
Who are the others in the world leadership whom you will add in that league?
Bueno, creo que muy poco.
I think that very few,
Porque en general escucho los
because
discursos de
in
los
general,
políticos
I
ganar,
listen to the speeches by politicians in the world,
y nunca he visto,
and I have hardly
he
ever
escuchado una autocrítica.
listened to a self-criticism on the part of any of them.
Y yo me he caracterizado por
And
la
I have
autocrítica.
characterized myself by being self-critical, you know.
Es cierto que defiendo
It is true
mis ideas
that
con
I defend my
vehemencia,
ideas vehemently,
y defiendo con
and I
vehemencia.
defend them
La obra de la
vigorously,
revolución.
as well as I defend the work of the
Pero me
revolution.
parece que esto es por una razón.
But it seems to me
Objetiva.
that this is due to an objective reason.
Sin embargo,
However,
sí, muchas veces he tenido que ser crítico
very often I have had to be critical
de la propia obra de la
of the very
revolución,
work of the
nuestra propia
revolution,
obra,
of our
y de
own
nuestro propio
work,
trabajo.
and of our own
Pero yo creo que en
endeavor.
general,
But I think that in general,
los políticos
politicians
no conocen lo que es la autocrítica.
are not aware of what self-criticism is about.
Y así, bueno, en el mundo he tenido figuras
And
prestigiosas,
well, we have
revolucionarias.
known in the world
Si nos
many
vamos un poco
important
más atrás,
personalities. If we go
está la
back in
figura de
history,
Lenin, por ejemplo.
you have the personality of Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin.
Y Lenin era
Lenin,
From
muy
Lenin to
autocrítico,
Gorbachev.
desde Lenin a Gorbachev,
muy autocrítico.
very self-critical
Sí.
he was.
I mean,
Hablando de-
Gorbachev is self-critical. You
Y
can't deny
Gorbachev
that.
también es
Gorbachev es
autocrítico.
crítico.
Yes, I think
Gorbachev es
he is.
crítico.
Yes, I think he is.
Realmente Gorbachev es crítico. Bueno,
Actually, he is
ha hecho una
self-critical.
crítica de todo lo que ha
Well, he has
ocurrido
criticized everything
en la Unión
that has
Soviética,
happened in the Soviet Union,
y pienso que es
and I
capaz de
believe
ser autócrítico.
that he's capable of being
Pero
self-critical.
bueno, Gorbachev surge
But anyway, Gorbachev
en un periodo muy breve,
emerged just a while ago.
es decir,
I mean,
hace apenas 5 años.
he has only been around for
surge
5 years. I mean, as a
dirigente
world,
de la Unión Soviética.
as a leader of the Soviet Union.
Yo estaba un poco remitiéndome a.
I was just
no quería
trying
hablar de
to,
personalidades
I did not want to talk about
actuales,
living personalities,
porque sería convertirme en Juan.
because I would be acting like a judge of living people. That's why I was trying to go back in history
A Lenin,
to the days of Lenin.
puedo mencionar
I
a
could also mention
Ho Chi Minh,
Ho Chi Minh from
una
Vietnam,
figura de una
a
persona, una
personality
gran modestia, un
of
gran
great
sentido
modesty,
crítico,
a great sense of self-criticism,
hablando de personalidades que no viven.
I mean, I'm talking about non-living personalities.
Yo creo que
Mao
Mao era
Zedong,
crítico.
I think he was
Era
critical
autocrítico.
and self-critical.
Nadie podrá negar
No one would be able to deny
el carácter revolucionario.
the revolutionary character of
Historia
Mao
revolucionaria
Zedong
de Mao.
and the history of and his history
Independientemente
in the
que
revolution,
uno no esté de acuerdo
regardless of the fact of whether
con
one
cada
agrees
una
or
de sus-
not with each and every one of his
de
conceptions
sus decisiones, ¿no?
or decisions.
Pero pienso que
But I believe
fue sin duda uno de los
that
grandes
he was
pensadores
undoubtedly one of the great thinkers
y de los grandes
and one of the great
creadores
creators
de nuestra época.
and revolutionaries of our times.
You've been talking about revolutionaries and revolutions, Mr.
Usted
President.
estaba hablando de revolucionarios y de revoluciones, señor
But look at
presidente.
what is happening to all the revolutionary regime.
Pero, Ricardo,
Do you feel a little lonely in all this?
me pregunto si en ese contexto no se siente usted un poco solo.
No,
No, I don't.
no me siento solo,
No, I don't feel lonely
porque me siento acompañado
because
por
I feel
convicciones muy profundas
accompanied by very deep convictions I
y por
hold
ideas muy claras
and by
sobre el
very
socialismo,
clear-cut ideas about socialism,
en las cuales
ideas
creo.
on which I believe.
Porque el socialismo en primer lugar no es
Because
un país.
socialism, in the first place, socialism is not a
El
country.
socialismo es una idea,
Socialism is an idea.
es un concepto,
Socialism is a concept,
es un sistema.
a system.
Y yo creo profundamente
And I am deeply convinced about socialism.
el socialismo.
I'm strongly convinced
Ahora,
about socialism.
El socialismo no ha resultado ser
Now, socialism
ni siquiera lo que concibieron los fundadores.
has not been what its forefathers thought it would be,
Marx,
because Marx, Engels,
incluso el propio Lenin,
even Lenin himself,
concebían que la revolución comenzaría
they thought that the revolution
por Europa.
would break out in Europe, in developed Europe.
Marx pensaba que
Marx
sería en
thought
Inglaterra,
that it would start in Great Britain,
en Alemania.
in Germany perhaps, that an isolated phenomenon,
El fenómeno que se ha producido en un grupo de países del este de
something that
Europa,
has happened in a number
No
of
en
countries
todos
of
por
Eastern
igual.
Europe, not in every one of them,
no significa
but in
nada.
some of them.
Significa un minuto en
That
la
means
historia,
just 1
un
minute
segundo en la historia.
or 1 second in the course of history.
Y vean esos mismos países.
And look at those same
¿Qué empieza a
countries,
ocurrir ya?
what is happening already.
En Polonia las huelgas.
In Poland, they are on strike every day.
Los obreros y la población.
The workers
y
and the
todo el mundo,
population and everybody
amargado,
are
preocupado,
embittered
por
and
la
worried
inflación,
because of the
la
inflation,
elevación del costo de la vida,
the high cost of life,
el desempleo,
Unemployment.
nuevo,
unemployment,
la gente que se queda desamparada,
people who are being left
los jubilados que se
helpless,
quedan olvidados.
the retired people, the pensioners who are
Empiezan
left
a conocer el capitalismo.
forsaken, so they are starting to know what capitalism is about. So now they are starting to react against
En
capitalism.
algunos países como Rumanía.
And in some countries like Romania,
Es curioso
it's curious, you know,
porque si en otros lugares barrieron a los
because if in other
antiguos
countries they swept away with the old communists,
comunistas, en Rumanía no barrieron
in
a
Romania
los
they did
antiguos
not.
comunistas. Y realmente el 86%
actually,
de la población
86% of the population voted for the National Salvation Committee.
no votó por los fascistas.
They did not vote for the fascists.
Y ahora hoy leía grandes
And
críticas
today I
del
was reading
gobierno de Estados
great
Unidos
criticisms by the US government
contra el gobierno
against the present government of Romania,
de Rumanía. Sencillamente porque
simply because
trató de poner orden.
it tried to bring the country back to
El
order.
gobierno que acaba de tener el
Because a
86%
government which has
de los
just obtained 86% of the vote is trying to bring the country back to order. So you see that behind all this there is great hypocrisy.
Es decir, no se produce el fenómeno
I mean,
igual
it's not the same
en todas partes.
in every
Y
country.
en la URSS
And in the Soviet
es una
Union,
situación diferente.
there is a different situation.
En la URSS los
In the
problemas
Soviet
surgen
Union, the problems
a partir del
emerged
propósito
following
de superar
the purpose to
viejos problemas,
overcome old
de
problems
perfeccionar
and to
esos,
improve socialism
explicar los por qué.
if one tried to explain
Yo pienso que hay
why.
una fuerte
I
influencia
think that there has been a
occidental
very strong Western influence
incuestionable.
that is unquestionable. I believe
Que hay una influencia
there has
occidental
been a very strong Western influence.
actualmente en esos
There is
procesos.
still, in those processes,
que
a strong
tienen
Western
lugar.
influence.
Creo que también, creo que
I also believe
la imagen de la sociedad de consumo
that the image of these consumption societies
han ejercido su
have
influencia
had a bearing
también.
on that situation.
Hay algunos países de Europa del Este que
Some
creen
countries
que
in Eastern Europe
dentro de 2 años o 3
seem to
van a
believe
vivir
that in
como
2 or 3
en París.
years they are going to live like they do in Paris.
Realmente, como hombre del tercer mundo,
As a man of the third world
que conoce lo que es el
Who's aware
intercambio desigual,
of the unequal terms of trade,
que tiene una idea clara
a man
de lo
who
que ha
has
sido
a
el
clear
colonialismo, el
idea
saqueo
of what
y la
colonialism,
explotación de nuestros pueblos,
plundering, and exploitation has been to our peoples,
y que sabemos que nos saquearon en el pasado y nos
knowing that we
saquean
were
en el
plundered
presente,
in the past and we are being
y
plundered in
nos
the
saquean
present,
cada vez más.
and we are being increasingly plundered
Lo que tenemos una idea
with
clara
every
del
passing
fenómeno
day.
neocolonial.
We have a very clear idea of colonialism, of neocolonialism and imperialism.
No podemos hacer la apología
Being
de
then
la
a man of the
sociedad de
third
consumo.
world, we cannot really make an apology for the consumption
Yo
societies.
pienso que se han reflejado
I believe
profundas lagunas
that
ideológicas
very deep ideological
y profundas
gaps
lagunas en la cultura
have shown
política
and very deep
de estas sociedades.
vacuums in the ideological
De estos
positions
países,
of these
incluso dentro de la
societies,
propia Unión
of
Soviética.
these countries, even inside the very Soviet Union.
Tal vez esto sea resultado
Perhaps
de un
this is the result
método dogmático
of dogmatic methods
de predicar la doctrina.
of preaching the doctrine,
Todo un dogmático de analizar
perhaps
los acontecimientos.
dogmatic ways of
Indiscutiblemente
pursuing their aims.
que tiene que haber
But
existido
undoubtedly,
de esas lagunas la
there must have
responsabilidad
been these
tiene que tener los
vacuums,
dirigentes,
and the responsibility must
Tiene que
fall
tenerla el
on the
partido.
leaders, on the parties.
indiscutiblemente.
Unquestionably, they have
Porque
responsibility
yo
in that.
pienso
To come back from your
Pero-
cosmic
Para retomar
design,
esa
the
visión un
more
poco global que
fundamental
usted me estaba dando,
bread and butter issue of today, that the system that you have in your
que el
country,
sistema que ustedes tienen acá en su país
the system that was introduced in the Soviet
y el
Union,
sistema que fue introducido en la Unión Soviética
sets up channels of distribution.
crea ciertos canales de distribución.
It is good for distributive justice,
Es bueno, pienso, para la distribución de la justicia.
but it is not good for the generation of wealth.
Sí.
ahora
Now then,
no se puede afirmar,
it cannot
no se
be
puede afirmar
affirmed
que la Unión Soviética
that the Soviet Union
no fuese capaz de crear enormes riquezas.
was not able to create great, enormous wealth.
Un país que fue 2
A
veces
country which
invadido
was invaded
y
twice
2 veces destruido
and destroyed twice
después de la revolución.
after the revolution.
En el año 18,
In the
19,
year
20
18, 19,
y en la
20s,
Segunda Guerra Mundial.
and in the Second World
Ningún
War.
país sufrió la destrucción
No
que
country
sufrió la
suffered the
Unión Soviética,
destruction that the Soviets
ni perdió la
endured
cantidad de vidas que perdieron
and
los
lost the
soviéticos.
number of lives the Soviets
Ningún
did
país hizo una
lose.
contribución mayor y
And no other
mayor
country made such a big
a la
contribution
derrota del fascismo.
to the defeat of
Eso no se puede
fascism
olvidar.
as that country. That cannot be forgotten.
Los demás países,
As
Estados
for the
Unidos
rest of the
quedaron
country,
intactos.
the United States were left intact.
La industria de Estados Unidos quedó
The United
intacta,
States
la
industry
industria
was
de Inglaterra,
intact. The same for the Great Britain.
La industria de Francia,
In
de,
France,
de la mayor parte de los
in
países
most of the
quedó
countries,
intacta.
they were untouched.
Todo viene-
That
mucho
country
viene de consumo,
was unable to create many consumption items.
de consumo del
Let's
hogar,
say
de
things for the
consumo
house,
personal.
personal,
Un país
goods.
que fue capaz
but it was a country
de fabricar el arma atómica,
capable
el
of
arma
manufacturing
hidrógeno,
the atom bomb,
en un momento que Estados
the
Unidos
hydrogen
tenía el
bomb,
monopolio.
at a time in which the United States had the monopoly
Un país que fue capaz
of
de
that
alcanzar
weapon,
el
a
espacio,
country that was able to reach the
una
outer
cosa
space,
pero no supo producir zapatos.
but did not know how to produce shoes,
Y no fue
good
capaz.
shoes.
Cometieron algunos o errores en algunos campos.
They made several mistakes in some other fields. Let's say in medicine, in my view, they made some mistakes.
Desde mi punto de vista y por la experiencia nuestra.
And according to our experience,
Que fueron la formación de profesionales.
the training of professionals, they train professionals with a very narrow profile, too narrow a profile, I would say. I would say that in general, and I could see that in Cuba too, where some of the Soviet experiences were implemented too, I had to wage a great battle and a great struggle, I should say, which finally we are coming to win. I mean, socialism gives us the opportunity to maximize the use of resources. And here I'm not talking of an idea only. I'm talking about an experience. The way our country has been able to do the things it has done under a situation of blockade, starting from an underdeveloped condition, and how our country has been able to obtain the present social and economic achievements. This would have been impossible without socialism. Then I really do not see any future through capitalism. Capitalism has been our misfortune.
Did you tell Mr. Gorbachev all this? I'm sure you told him exactly this in so many words when you met him
Estoy seguro que usted le habrá dicho todas estas cosas a Gorbachev en más de una ocasión.
Bueno, no.
Well,
Yo he hablado con Gorbachev.
no, I have talked to Gorbachev, but we have
He
talked
participado en reuniones.
about other problems. I have attended other meetings with the other countries of SMEA. Some of these ideas I exposed to him. In a meeting in Moscow with the attendance of all the countries members of Comecon, I told him about the Cuban experience. I said that according to our experience, we could not believe in capitalist mechanisms which would promote automatic development. We could not believe in that. But these subjects that we're discussing now, by April, when he came here, the problems that have occurred in Eastern Europe had not occurred then. The problems which took place later in the Soviet Union had not taken place yet when he came here in April. All these problems of Lithuania, the problems in Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, all those problems came about later.
So he has struck a very good rapport with the American leadership. And you have had a continuous problem with the Americans ever since 1959.
Ustedes han tenido problemas con los norteamericanos desde el año 1959, creo.
In his speech in Parliament, he has even offered to mediate between you and the United
En su discurso
States.
ante el Parlamento Soviético, Gorbachev incluso se ha ofrecido para mediar, como una suerte de mediador.
With this American pressure off from you, don't you think you would be able to do much more inside your country?
¿No cree usted con la dirección
Bueno,
norteamericana?
ciertamente, los soviéticos
Certainly the
pueden hacer
Soviets
más que nosotros
can do more than we can
por persuadir
to persuade
a la dirección de Estados Unidos,
the American leadership
que discuta con Cuba
to discuss with Cuba
o que cambie su
or to
política
change its
contra
policy towards Cuba.
Gorbachev tiene más
Gorbachev
posibilidades
has more possibilities
de esa
than I do to do that.
y a mí me parece correcta
And it
la
seems to me
declaración
correct
que hizo
the statement he
en
made.
este sentido
I find it correct in that
y le
sense,
agradezco
and I am really appreciative
ese-
for him having made that statement, for having made that
ese pronunciamiento.
offer, that
Porque ciertamente yo
statement, because I do believe
creo que ellos pueden
that they
hacer más que nosotros.
can do more than we
Tienen
could,
comunicación y
since
nosotros
they have a certain
prácticamente
rapport, as
no
you said,
tenemos,
with the American leadership, and we
ninguna
practically have no
comunicación.
communication
Pero-
with the American leadership.
pero
However,
el problema no es fácil
it is not such an easy
en las
problem
actuales condiciones.
under the present circumstances.
Antes de que se produjera el derrumbe de los
Before
países socialistas,
the
del
collapse of the Eastern Socialist countries,
antes de que se agravaran las
before
dificultades en la propia
the
Unión Soviética,
difficulties sharpening in the Soviet Union itself,
la URSS tenía más
The
posibilidades
Soviet
de
Union
influir
had more
en
possibilities to
Estados
have
Unidos
a leverage on
para
the
que cambiara
Americans,
su política
for the
con-
Americans to change their policy towards Cuba.
Pero después que se produjeron
However,
todos estos
after all
acontecimientos
these events have taken place
en la Europa del Este,
in Eastern Europe,
la euforia se apoderó
euphoria has taken hold
de la administración de Estados
of the American administration.
Después que se hicieron evidentes las dificultades
After the
económicas de la URSS,
difficulties, the economic difficulties of the Soviet
La
Union have
euforia de
become
Estados Unidos se
evident,
multiplicó.
have become apparent, the euphoria has multiplied
La
in the United
prepotencia.
States. The prepotency,
la arrogancia,
the arrogancy
la idea de sentirse
idea
dueños del mundo,
of feeling the masters of the world. And I say that I know that what the United States wants is not to negotiate with Cuba, but rather to annihilate the Cuban Revolution.
entonces en esas circunstancias
And
veo
in
muy
that
difícil
situation, I find it very
que
difficult
Gorbachev pueda
that Gorbachev
cambiar
would be
esa-
able to change
ese odio,
that hatred,
ese espíritu de venganza,
that
y
revengeful
esa
spirit,
esperanza de Bush
and
de
that
ver
hope
destruida la
Mr. Bush
revolución.
has to destroy the Cuban
Durante
Revolution.
For 31
Durante
years,
31 años,
the Americans have despised
los
you,
norteamericanos le han despreciado
and you have survived.
y ustedes han sobrevivido.
Why?
No nos han
First,
despreciado, no.
They have not despised
Nos
us. I would
odian,
not say
pero
that. I
no
would
nos
say that they
desprecian.
hate us, but they do not despise
No es lo
us,
mismo.
which is not the same.
Somos hostiles, pero
¿Cuál es la
nos
diferencia?
respetan.
They respect us.
Bueno, se desprecia a aquellos que
You
no
despise
son capaces de
those
defenderse.
who cannot defend themselves.
desprecia a aquellos
You
que no son
despise
capaces de resistir.
those who cannot resist.
Se desprecia
You
a aquellos
despise
que no son capaces de
those
luchar.
who are not capable of fighting.
¿Comprende? Pero a los que
But
se
those
defienden,
who defend
a los
themselves,
que luchan,
those who
a
fight,
los que saben combatir y
those who
saben
know how to
resistir,
fight and resist,
se les respeta,
those you respect,
aunque se les odie.
even when you hate them.
have you in these 31
Me
years
pregunto si en estos 31
ever been
años
bored with power?
se ha
Have you
dado-
ever said, well, I think I should now move out of the
si
way
en algún
and let
momento usted se
someone
ha
else
dicho,
come?
bueno, ya es hora de que yo me aparte y deje a otros el camino. ¿Se ha
Bueno, a
sentido
mí me
así?
parece que si me hubiera ocurrido
It seems to me that if
algo
that
de eso,
is something like that had
habría
happened to
sido
me,
realmente deshonroso para mí.
it would have been really dishonorable for me
Como luchador
as a fighter
y como revolucionario.
and as a revolutionary.
Porque si en algún momento
Because
me
if
aburro
at
de
any
lo que estoy
time I
haciendo,
get bored of what I'm doing,
significaría que no amo lo que
it
estoy
would
haciendo,
mean that I'm not loving what I'm
que no
doing.
aprecio
It
lo
would
que
mean that
estoy
I do not appreciate what I'm doing.
haciendo. Si algún día
If at any time
me hubiera cansado,
I had felt
ese día
tired,
habría dejado de ser
I think
revolucionario.
that day I would no longer have been a revolutionary. If one
me
day
aparto de
I
mi
say
trabajo,
I get away from my work,
deserto de mi
I
tarea,
desert from my
ese día
task,
habría dejado de
that
ser
day
revolucionario.
I would no longer be a
Creo
revolutionary.
que no puedo
I
permitirme
think
el
that I
lujo de
cannot
vivir esa cosa.
afford any of those feelings.
But sometimes a great leader like
Sin embargo, a
yourself
veces
is
un
a
gran
banyan
líder como
tree
usted
becomes
es
a
como
banyan tree
un árbol de júcaro
under which the other leaders do
bajo
not
el
grow.
cual
Sí.
¿reflexionado usted sobre eso? ¿Ha
Pero no he
meditado sobre
tenido
eso?
que preocuparme.
Yes, but I have not needed to worry about
Porque
that
no he sido ese tipo de
because I
árbol.
have not been that kind of a tree.
Más bien, si utilizamos la imagen del árbol,
Rather, if we were to use the image of the banyan
Yo
tree,
diría
I would say
que al lado del árbol
that
han
close to the
surgido
tree,
otros muchos árboles.
many other trees have been growing.
Comprende. Creo que cualquier dirigente,
I think that any leader,
sin que esto implique que yo
without
acepte
this meaning that I accept
el homenaje que él
the
me hace
homage that you are
al
paying
decirme gran
me
líder,
in calling me a great leader,
creo que cualquier
I
líder
think that
verdadero
any true leader
deja de ser líder
would no longer be such
si no es maestro,
if he's not a teacher,
si no es formador
if
de
he's not a
revolucionarios,
trainer of other
si
revolutionaries,
no es formador de
if
cuadros,
he's not a creator of
si no
other
es
cadres,
creador de otros
if he's
muchos.
not the creator of many other revolutionaries.
Es decir, un árbol
I mean,
produce semillas.
a tree produces
En ese
seeds,
sentido, digamos,
and in that
no que
sense,
yo,
let's say that not me
pero la parte que me ha
personally,
correspondido en la
but as
revolución,
far as it has been my role in the
que si es
revolution,
un árbol,
if you
La
were to compare me to a
revolución
tree, I would say that the revolution is a big
y
tree.
al amparo de la revolución,
And I would say that under the tree of the revolution,
millones de hombres y mujeres
millions of men and women have been formed and trained.
aprenden a
Millions.
pensar. El presidente de Estados Unidos
The President of the United States
tiene 10 veces más
has 10
prerrogativas.
times more prerogative than I do.
Yo no nombro un ministro.
I do not appoint a minister.
El ministro tiene que nombrar el
Ministers
Consejo
have to be
Delegado.
appointed by the State Council.
Yo no nombro un ministro.
I do not appoint a minister myself. I do not appoint an ambassador.
Yo prácticamente por mi cuenta no nombro a nadie.
I practically appoint no one.
Influencia
Now,
mía
if you
no es
compare
mínima.
my influence, it is not minimum.
Influencia.
My
Mis
influence,
prerrogativas son pocas.
I have few
La
prerogatives,
influencia es grande.
but I have great
Pero yo no
influence.
tengo que estar nombrando ni ministros, ni
I don't need to
embajadores,
appoint
ni
ministers
cientos de funcionarios
or
de-
ambassadors or party or officials.
Si usted compara la influencia
If you
en
compare
las masas, la
my
influencia
influence
de la
on the
sociedad
masses,
es mayor
on
que la de
society,
muchos dirigentes.
it is of course greater than that of many other political leaders.
Sir, you are very dogmatic.
Yo estuve a punto de decirle en un momento que usted era demasiado dogmático.
Yo le hubiera dicho que sí,
And I would have said yes,
pero un dogmático flexible.
but a flexible, a resilient
Un
dogmatic,
con los principios
a dogmatic
y flexible que en la
with
estrategia
principles
y en la táctica.
and resilient in tactic and strategy.
So there are two ways of looking at you.
Entonces,
One is
una,
that while socialist states all around the world
que
are
mientras
collapsing,
todos están
here is a
colapsando,
man
aquí
¿Están
tenemos
qué?
colapsando, están
here is a
derrumbándose.
man
Aquí tenemos a un hombre
of strong convictions
de fuertes convicciones
who, in spite of these debris
y a
around him,
pesar de todo ese desastre a
is
su
standing
alrededor,
firm.
se mantiene firme.
That is one way of looking
Esa
at
es una
you.
forma de percibirlo a usted.
The other way of looking at you is
Otra forma sería
that while the world is
que
changing,
mientras el mundo está cambiando,
here is a man
aquí tenemos a un hombre
who is inflexible.
es inflexible.
Bien, pero ¿en qué dirección cambia el mundo?
But in what direction is this world
Si el
changing?
mundo cambia hacia la
If the
derecha,
world changes to the right,
yo sigo hacia la
I
izquierda.
continue to the left.
Y mientras más cambia a la derecha,
And the more it goes to the
más
right,
defiende.
the more
Y
I
mientras
go
más
to the
adversarios
left.
tenga,